Today I'm bringing you a Scarlet Enclave clear from my Warlock's POV. We're going to start this first boss with precasting and Incinerate into our Immolate Conflag to get our backdraft rolling. From here we're essentially going to be casting Chaos Pool off of cooldown and using Incinerate otherwise. On this boss you'll see it does spawn some adds. I did not utilize this too well, but looking back you can use these adds to proc Decimate often throughout the fight, which will essentially just increase your damage and increase your amount of soul fires you can cast throughout the fight. We're going to be damaging him down to 70%, and he's going to be going up into his air phase here, and we will work to reposition here. Rocket boots to get into position, and from here we are just full cranking single target this boss. We're going to make sure we're keeping our corruption up at all times, because it's going to increase our Chaos Bolt and Soul Fire damage. And make sure our backdraft stays rolling, which just entails applying Immolate and using Conflag. Feels so good to get one of those big Chaos Bolt crits. They hit so hard. I mean, I think I saw a top crit of 39k on this raid here, so... As you see, Fire Destro is just absolutely cranking. This is without any 6-piece, without Infusion of Souls, which is honestly pretty mandatory. It's going to make our Incinerate cast about a second instead of 1.3 seconds like you're seeing. And same with the Chaos Bolts. And it's also going to reduce our global cooldown. So here within a week or two, once we get that 6-piece and the Trinket, Destro Warlock is really going to see its potential. The tanks are bringing these Infernals to our range stack, as once we lose our light, the Infernals will keep us from being silenced. Unfortunately, we just got that Infernal landed on us right before that Chaos Bolt cast went off. That hurts. But from here, as you see, we just barely got out of range with that Infernal, move back in, and we can crank that boss. Now we're in the execute phase. You're going to want to make sure that you are using Soulfire as your filler opposed to Incinerate, and only casting Incinerate to keep that fire damage buff active. Rank 1 Balnazzar. Give me a subscribe for that, boys. Moving to Beatrix here. This boss was... We did this on 20-man. This is a 20-man POV. I have a couple videos in here with 40-man POV, 20-man POV to kind of switch it up. It's much more interesting on 20-man because everything just gets melted on 40. For some of these bosses, you'll see me running Shadow Bolt Volley opposed to like the Chaos Bolt or the single target build. A lot of that's going to change. Ashbringer is so strong that it's really going to take care of the cleave and the adds as our warriors and rets and hunters start to obtain those. Once that happens, we'll just focus full single target and be ready to absolutely crank the bosses here. For my Warlocks, I will be posting at the end of the video some of the talent builds I ran, my enchants, my consumes, my gear, and the different runes I ran per fight. Kind of discuss what you need to know to min-max this raid. The boss becomes active. We are always going to focus the boss and cleave off of her. In my future kills, I'm not going to be running Shadow Bolt Volley. It's not worth it. Instead, we'll be running straight single target on this boss here, but from here we're just dodging the adds, so we're not taking any unnecessary damage. You can eat some of these adds damage as well. They really don't hurt that bad if you got good healers that you can trust, and it's not around the time a shock break is going to come out. Unfortunately on this fight you'll see momentarily that I kind of get fucked. Some of these mages will cast Pyroblast on a player and ideally they're interrupted. This pull was going pretty well and we would have continued to climb right here, but as you see right here, boom, both of those mages just casted Pyroblast at me and deleted me, absolutely one-shot me. It's kind of unfortunate. You're going to see a floor POV for the rest of this boss. Again, this boss is really a joke with all the nerfs that it received. As long as you interrupt these mages and don't let those random one-shots happen, it's pretty much a cakewalk. Just want you guys to be able to see the kill, how it was executed, and then we'll get to Sully and talk about our strat there. Next week, we'll be better prepared for that. We'll have a much better kill. We'll also run a single target build instead and kill the spots much quicker. Moving to Solistrasza. Again, I ran Shadowbolt Volley here.
2, 1.
My precast stay the same. You know, I'm going to reapply. I'm going to apply my fire damage buff, get my 2 dots rolling, keep backdraft up. And since I'm running Shadowbolt Volley, I will use Shadowbolt as my filler. As with the 4-piece, Shadowbolt's increased damage is worth casting over Incinerate in this case. My thought with running Shadowbolt Volley here is I could proc Decimation on the adds easy and therefore use Soulfires a lot on this boss. It really didn't work as planned or as I thought. In the future on these kills, I will run Chaos Bolt in a straight single target build instead, because our guild is also just hard focusing one of the whelps and letting the other 2 blow up on themselves. They'll basically expire over time and just blow up if you don't kill them anyways. So single target definitely will be the play. I'm not utilizing the decimation procs as I should be here. And come next week, we'll have a much better kill. As you'll see by the end of the fight, Warlock was still absolutely able to crank this fight. I just know that based off watching this back, it has a lot higher potential and a little bit more beneficial for the group if we're able to run that single target build instead. You might notice I'm getting Nightfall procs. That's because I'm running a Nightfall Conflag build. And like I mentioned earlier, at the end of the video, I will be going over my talent builds for different fights, my runes, my enchants, my gear, as it does switch up on some fights, and I want all my Warlock players to be able to min-max their gameplay. Another reason you don't really want to run SB Volley here, like I'm just grabbing unnecessary aggro on these adds. As you see, they just blow up by themselves. This cleave damage is literally pointless on them, so I would, depending on your group's needs, I would highly recommend against using this build. You might not think so, but as a Fire Destro, I really think you're going to do more damage anyways not running this SBV build. Chaos Bolt's too valuable, and you can focus more on using your decimation procs by just hitting one of the whelps when they're below 35%, and you can keep your Soulfire decimation proc rolling basically half of this fight, which is insane. One thing to mention as well, we try to have our range stay fairly close in the stack. That way when he shoots out the fire, it all comes to one spot and we just move all together, one as a group, instead of having fire everywhere all over the floor. More adds are going to come down. Again, our group's going to be focus targeting the 1. We're going to switch and cleave off of the boss. We're going to burn it down here. As you see, we're doing pretty good damage. A lot of this damage is being wasted by the cleave due to us not even worrying about these whelps. And as mentioned before, next week, once we run the single target build, we will do even more damage than what's stated here. I can almost guarantee that based off watching this back. Jump into Mason here. I actually really like this boss. I think he's really cool.
2, 1.
Always open with your Incinerate into your Immolate, Conflag, Corruption, and then you're using your Chaos Bolt off of cooldown, and and just maintaining your fillers here. The rotation's not so complicated. What's more important is understanding when you can greed and when you can't with your cast, and when it's better to prioritize like an extra Chaos Bolt cast over reapplying your dots, for example. I know that this boss goes down at 75% every 25%, but I'm trying to proc some of my buffs on him, like I just reapplied Backdraft right before this ad phase came out, so I don't have to worry about, you know, having a slow cast speed at the beginning of this adds low health, if that makes sense. Now our cannons were very fast, they were on point there. That's what we want every phase to look like. The boss is already active again. So we're just switching back over to the boss, and we'll let those little ads be cleaved down. Only applying our backdrafts at the last second. You want to make sure you are using your fillers as much as possible. Conflag you never want to use unless you're just reapplying your backdraft. Boss is about to phase. Just squeeze the Shadow Burn in there last second, as we just wanted an extra global on that boss for some more damage. Want to make sure we have that corruption rolling with our 4-piece always. Get our backdraft and our incinerate buffs active, and I'll actually continue to hit this ad. Right here, I'm going to get my Soulfire proc off of him, boom, and now I can use Soulfire as my filler opposed to Incinerate. As often as we can proc this buff, the better. Right now, really, I should have cast another Incinerate on that ad to get my Soulfire back up, but I chose to maintain on the boss here. It's not the biggest deal in the world, as in just a second I'm going to proc that Soulfire anyways, but looking back, it is something that you can min-max here. We really got trapped by the fire here. Luckily, our tank has a position where we can continue to cast. Almost got ourselves in a pickle there. You can pop a frozen rune and just run through the fire. You're not going to die, but right now I'm debating running around the fire, staying here because I want to stay in range of the boss when it becomes active. Some of our cannon phases have been really quick. This one you're going to see, we had, unfortunately, our guy that was assigned to go to the ship, he died with the cannon. So we're just going to have to wait out this boss's bubble. Now what happens is this boss will do a ton of increased damage, I believe, to the tank if you do not shoot him with the cannonball. So we're talking in Discord to be prepared to, you know, pop defensives on our tank and just melt this boss down ASAP. Ideally, the boss would have been active about 20 seconds ago. We would have been absolutely cranking on this fight. Regardless, we were still able to get a 99, I believe a rank 2 on this fight at the time. And as this boss is going to be in the execute phase, we'll just get our incinerate buff rolling, our backdraft up. Had to resist right there, is a bit unfortunate. And from here, we're using Soulfires as our filler here. Only incinerating to keep that fire buff active. You're going to see in this execute, even in the last 12%, Warlock just continues to climb. This is how it's going to be, and with some of these fights where you're able to proc Decimation, which is the Soulfire proc, a majority of the fight, you're really going to see Warlocks climb as if the boss is in execute phase, even when it's not. Jumping over to Beastmaster here, I want to share this tip with you guys. Have a hunter reset this boss. He will pad away from this spot. You jump up on this haystack, and then you have all your range sit at the top of this building, and they get to ignore all mechanics and free cast the entire time. For my Warlocks, make your pet stay on, set it to stay, It'll stay at the bottom and
Five,
be ready to cast on the
4,
boss.
3, 2, 1.
With this 2-target cleave, we are going to be running Shadowbolt Volley. Now, since I am the Destro lock in the group and my other two are AF, I am on Curse of Wreck duty, as well as using Demonic Pact instead of Everlasting Affliction. Therefore, I'm going to have to continue to maintain my corruptions. It's not that big of a deal. It's a tiny bit of a DPS loss. Overall, it's a big gain for the raid group, so make sure to do this if you're running Destro or if you don't have another lock covering it. I really like Destro on these cleave fights as the Shadowbolt casts are just insanely fast. This is without 6-piece, without the trinket. So we're going to be looking at literally 1 second Shadowbolts and no GCD here in a week or two once we receive those items. And then I think we can really see Destro's potential in a fight like this. As a lot of people are running AF, and technically AF is outperforming with Unstable Affliction build on this fight instead. But I think it's going to be very close once we get into full biz, with potentially Destro out-edging it by a tiny bit. Fortunately to my Warlock friends, you know that they recently nerfed Shadowbolt Volley, or we would just be ascending on this fight. As you can see, Warlock's still cranking. In our case, we are just making sure that Curse of Wreck stays active on both bosses, Corruption stays active. You need that with the 4-piece. And you just keep the Immolate on one of the bosses so you can continue to proc your backdraft when it falls off. Otherwise, get out as many Shadow Bolts as you can. That is going to be your most valuable cast in this fight, obviously. And while these melee are sitting down here sweating, just doing some type of fin strat to negate the mechanics as well down there, we are standing up at the top, not worrying about a single thing, and just sending off on this boss here. Boss is coming close to an end. Instead of reapplying that dot, I just want to get out a couple extra Shadow Bolt casts, as it's going to be more valuable at this point. Moving over to Reborn Council. I hate my POV on this boss because it's really hard for maybe you guys as a viewer to see what's going on. You have to stand at like the edges of the wall in this fight to avoid some of the fire damage. It's just kind of messy. And one thing I want to immediately mention is I do have a weak word that I'll put in my description that will show the boss's raid frames. So you'll be able to see like all of their health and what dots each of them have applied anywhere on your screen that you choose. I switched to this once I learned about it. For this kill I don't have it, and it does make things a little tricky. It's good to have it because you know when you can proc, decimations off of certain bosses when they're below 35% health. It also just allows you to have an easy dot tracker. So I'd highly recommend downloading this weak word that I will have in the description. Make this boss a lot cleaner. I was talking earlier in the video about switching to single target builds, and this is another one of those fights where most locks are running Shadowbolt Volley, but I chose instead to run a single target build. Why? Well, number one, positioning on this boss can be tricky. They're not always in range of the Shadowbolt Volleys, and we haven't exactly figured out, I guess, the best positioning for that. And two, just because I believe the single target potential of Destro, with the amount of, with the majority of this fight, how you can keep Decimation procced, I think that it will outweigh SBV anyways, unless you had a perfect 3-stack, let's say the whole fight. But that wouldn't make sense to do because they'll take reduced damage from Herod's aura. So as range, we're instructed to just keep burning down Herod. Once we get into a bad position, or I'm sorry, once we get him low health, we'll have to switch off to whatever the raid lead's designated target is. The only time I'll ever switch back is if to cast a Incinerate real quick, just to proc my Decimation up. Ideally, once we have one of the bosses below 35%, you never cast an Incinerate unless you are proccing your buff. You want to cast Soul Fires instead. They're going to way outweigh your damage of Incinerate. And Warlock's execute phase is just so strong due to this. In a fight like this, where, you know, this boss is still at 80% health, but the other ones are in execute range, I can proc my execute off of those low ones and smash these bosses with high health for, like I said, a long majority of the fight here. Kind of did some math here, and during this fight I'd be able to keep decimation proc about 60% of the fight opposed to 35% of the fight. It's going to significantly increase the Warlock's damage and just make our single target through the roof. Especially when we pair it with that OP trinket and 6-piece I've been talking about a lot in this video. I keep mentioning it because it's pretty mandatory to get that for your Beast gear. And I will be dropping a new video to show what, you know, what the differences look like once I'm in, you know, a more ideal geared state and we are got these bosses down pat on 20 man with good strats for you guys. As you see, I just stick to the edge of this wall to avoid that fire damage. There's been times where I'm on the edge and I take a tick. I'm really not sure. For the majority, I don't take any hits from the fire. And if I do, it's 1 tick max. In the future, I think I'm going to stand at the top of the room. It's too hard to see stuff. My camera angle is all scuffed. Really don't like the position I'm in at all during this fight. But we're going to finish this boss off. As you see, Destro Warlock is very powerful here. Moving to Lillian Voss. Actually one of my favorite fights. I don't like the small room, but I do think it's a really cool fight.
3, 2, 1.
I'm going to start with all the normal, get our buffs up, use our Chaos Bolts off of cooldown. And again, this is one of those fights where you really want to min-max your cast here. I'll show you a couple examples of that as we go through it. Going to reapply our Immolate, get our Corruption back rolling, use our Chaos Bolt, and Incinerate Filler here. This boss slaps the tanks. It's like the main thing to worry about on this boss, as his Ignite got nerfed. I'm trying to get one more cast in during that grasp. I was able to get it. Stay in here and cast, and you'll see I move in between my instant class globals. So I just did a conflag, and then I jump moved to get into a better position in case we have to spread. Now it says to keep moving. If you watch my debuffs, they'll go up to about 2 or 3 stacks, and then I'll move 1 time in between casts, and those debuffs will drop. A lot of people will continue to move this entire phase, but as I just showed you, it's not necessary. You can just move between casts. Got the concoction on us, rocket boot to get out of there ASAP, and we are back to planting and casting. Gotta utilize how many casts we can get off in this fight. We're already pre-spread for this. Again, one of our tanks got slapped. It's looking a little scary here. We're going to be able to recover. We're going to get the grip. Should have probably just shadow burned or something right there since I wasn't going to get a cast off. Just looking back, another min-max thing we could have been doing. And boys, we are in execute phase, so now we are just going to send off. Use those soul fires unless we need to proc and incinerate. Still prioritizing Chaos Bolt over everything. And continue to follow the mechanics of the boss. Stay in when he pulls you in. Move out in between your global casts. So typically your instants will be better. It's a little too clunked there. Probably should have moved a second faster, but regardless, no one died. It really wasn't a big deal. That last Chaos Bolt off. We were able to get rank 1 on Lillian Voss there. Our single target is going to be through the roof with Beast gear and that 6-piece.
4, 3, 2.
Going to Caldoran. Love this fight. One of the coolest fights I've seen in SOD. And like I mentioned throughout this video a lot, you just see we are running Chaos Bolt. We said screw the Shadow Bolt Volley. I noticed that our cleave is not going to be an issue here at all. They're not going to need my help killing these adds. We have 3 other warlocks that are running Affliction and using Shadowbolt Volley. We have our melee DPS, etc. So I'm going to solely focus on single target, burning the Ashbringer, etc.
3, 2, 1.
Now you want to turn away from those blinds. Ideally, you get a cast off like 1 second before the blind goes off, or you start your cast, you turn, and then you turn your camera back to finish the cast, and you never lose any uptime. Right now, a big mistake I made on this fight is I should be proccing my decimation off of the adds. Like I've mentioned a couple times throughout this raid, when you have an add to utilize, you want to hit them when they're below 35% health with an Incinerate to make sure you can proc your Soulfire buff. Therefore, you just change your filler to Soulfire and your damage will be significantly increased. If I did that here, you're going to see I still cranked this boss. I was able to get rank 1 Destro on this boss, but it would have been significantly higher if I played this first phase right.
3, 2,
Turn away from the blind every time. At the time I'm doing this voiceover and recording, I did kill this boss on my Boomkin and found that I guess I found the sweet spot of being able to cast while turning and then turn back to finish my cast right before at the end of his cast, but just something that you can look to min-max in the future.
3, 2.
I almost greeted there. I was worried I'd get blinded, so I decided to cancel my cast. Again, 100% should have been proccing my decimation procs. Would have done way more damage than we were already doing. But definitely hard focus the Ashbringer during this phase. This right here is the hardest phase of the fight. Well, this and the phase before. You make it through this clean, this fight is pretty much over with. It's a cakewalk. I did just kill this on 20 man as I'm recording this. You see that this is a 40 man kill. On 20 man, the cleave can be more valuable depending on your comp. But as I mentioned earlier, Ashbringer will start to carry the cleave in a couple weeks as more melees get it. And therefore, we're just going to be running single target pretty much on every fight. Maybe only running Shadowbolt Volley on Beastmaster, but I'll talk to my Warlocks about that at the end of this video. Now, it doesn't matter if you do or you don't, but I go ahead and use Rocket Boots on here just to get in position of the phase quicker, I guess. It's not really necessary. You have time regardless before the boss will become active. This boss does have a long execute phase, and if I were to proc my decimations correctly at the beginning of the fight, I could keep my Soulfire buff active for over 65 to 75% of this boss fight. So come in some future kills, expect to see me absolutely blasting off on the logs here.
3, 2,
Turn away from the blind, let them continue to cleave the adds. Should be looking for a switch to proc my decimate. Last time I'm going to say that, but I can't stress enough how important that really is for min-maxing our single target damage. As you see, the Warlocks in my group that are running Affliction and running Shadowbolt Volley, we're staying quite competitive with them. And we have not really utilized the execute phase like we should. And we have not also reached the boss's 35% execute phase yet. So you will see momentarily the power of that and how I start to take off on the meters here. Now we have reached execute phase. We started this off at 7.7k a second. Would have easily been over 9k at this point if we were using the Soulfire correctly throughout the fight.
3, 2,
I just want you guys to note that to see how much we climb here during this execute phase, because it's quite noticeable. For all my trackers down here at the bottom, I like to use those to have an easy reference for my Incinerate buffs, my Backdraft, my Soulfire mainly, and the other two aren't necessarily needed, but just things I like to track. I will go over at the end of this video what I have active and what add-on I'm using to show all of that. So we started execute phase at about 7.7k. We're already reaching up to 8.3. I could have been doing this literally the entire fight. Looking back, it frustrates me seeing that, but something that I want all of my Destros to note and be prepared to do in the future encounters. This is a burn phase. This can be a tight push in a 20-man comp. Again, we just killed 20-man at the time I'm doing this voiceover. It was pretty close, but we also weren't very optimized and found some things we could do better. But other than that, this phase is really a joke. If you just make it through this burn phase, you're good. This fire breath add, I don't know if it's bugged, but it literally does no damage. Now the other ones that like do a blade storm and what's the other one? Does like a consecrate on the ground. Those are working as intended. Those will hurt really bad. But I've noticed that fire breath one does literally nothing. Proc our incinerate buff here, and we are going to town with our executes on our soul fires. So we went from like a stagnant 7.7k. We're going to finish this boss around 8.7, 8.8, just from using that execute range. We're looking at 10 plus k with this current gear, exact same setup, if I use decimation correctly at the beginning of the fight. Still, I rank 1 this fight. I just always look for what could have been better. And that was a Scarlet Enclave full clear for my Warlock's POV. If you stuck around this late in the video, first off, thank you so much. I want to mention a majority of you guys are not subscribed. Please subscribe if you like the videos, if you find them helpful. It's going to help my channel growth, and it's going to help me continue to bring out these videos, or videos like this to you. Now for my Warlocks, I want to get into some of the specifics. I know some of you may want that information. First thing I want to talk about, because I've received a ton of questions on this, is my weak auras or my trackers. So first off, I will post weak auras in the description that you need to use. I really don't use that many weak auras. I actually use an add-on called TellMeWhen instead of weak auras for a lot of different buff tracking, because I just find it beneficial and it helps me lag less. So once you have TellMeWhen installed, you just hit, and it's on CurseForge by the way, just type /TMW. We get a pop-up window like this. Now if you don't have anything set up, you'll just see these gray boxes. You'll see like a line of 4 of them. If you want to track a buff, for example, so say I want to track my trinket proc, right? I will right click this box, go to buff and debuff, hit only cast by me, show timer text, and then I'm going to simply type in the buff I want to track. So in this case, Essence of Saffron. Okay. /TellMeWhen to close the window. I pop Essence of Saffron, and as you can see, there's my tracker. It's that easy. That's what I did for all of these buffs that I have tracking. The ones I would really recommend you have are these 3 right here. If you're playing Firelock, you need to know when you have these 3 buffs active. You can use weak auras like mentioned. The only weak aura that I really recommend for this raid is the raid frame one that I talked about during the Reborn Council fight, that will allow you to see the boss's health and their dots that are on them, etc. I did not use it in this video, but I found out about it after I killed these bosses, and I highly recommend it. So that'll be in the description. And just to kind of close off this video and talk about a few closing points here. For my runes on pretty much every fight, you see I run Shadowbolt Volley on some fights. I'm going to recommend you do not run Shadowbolt Volley on any fight other than Caldoran 20-man if your group needs to cleave. Maybe thinking here. I would just, oh, and Beastmaster for sure. You're going to want to run Shadowbolt Volley for Beastmaster. Other than those two, I highly recommend if you're playing Destro to just stick with your single target build. Now, why? Well, Ashbringer is going to start to carry the cleave on the ads. We, as Warlocks, especially Fire Warlocks, on 6 of the 8 bosses, so on Balnazzar, Beatrix, Mason, Solistrasza, Reborn Council, and Caldoran, those 6 fights, we'll be able to keep our decimation procs active for, over 50% of the fight, opposed to when the target's at 35% health, due to being able to proc those off the ads. This is going to make our single target potential insane. As of right now, I have sims showing Warlock being the highest single target class in the game for this phase, and that is based off of our proc rate of decimation. So I hope that clears a few things up. If you got questions about that, definitely ask me. If, like, say you do run Shadowbolt Volley on Beatrix, I would recommend using Demonic Knowledge with that. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to stick to this exact rune that I have showing right here on pretty much every single fight. For the gear that I ran for this video, I was not in full bis. I'm actually very far from full bis still. I'm missing my 6-piece new, which, just read that, it's insane. And I'm missing the Infusion of Souls, which is by far our biggest upgrade that we can get out of this raid. It's one of the trinkets, reduces our global cooldown by half a second, increases our casting speed, and paired with this 6-piece, it's basically going to make us cast everything at about a second and not have any GCD to worry about anymore. So it is insane. It's going to significantly increase our top end damage. But enough rambling about that. Here is the gear I am using currently, or that I use for this raid. Missing like the neck still from Nax that increases our casting speed. ATS. So here's the thing with ATS. We're still running sims. We're still trying to figure out what's best. As of right now, if you have another Warlock in your group running ATS, I would recommend using Mirage. But I could see Remnants of Red with the new Putris Diary trinket, which is right... This trinket, it turns into something much greater than that. It's like 65 spell power and 2% crit once you get the pages for it. You might run Remnants in Red and that over Mirage. It's hard to say right now because we're still judging the Mirage's damage and the proc rate and how often we have to move these bosses. Right now, Mirage is doing like 4% of my damage in single target, which seems pretty high. Seems pretty crazy. If that's the case, Mirage will probably stick Bis, but we'll see. We got some testing to do. Regardless, you can't really go wrong with any of these 3 options, and your group might just make you continue to run ATS if it shows to be a better gain for your party or raid, but it's worth mentioning. My trinkets, my rings that I used. I did have 4 set of the new. That's why I was using Corruption a lot as Destro Lock. You do need to keep that active. So that is what I had for this raid. Really, I guess the last thing I want to go over is the consumes that I would highly recommend using. So you're going to want to use your Flask of Ancient Knowledge, Elixir of Greater Firepower, Elixir of Shadow Power, Elixir of the Mage Lord, Enchanted Repellent, and Spirit of Zanza at pretty much all times. Obviously, if you're on not farm content, you're going to lose your Spirit of Zanza. And then you can use the Sunrise Omelette Food, or just opt for the Feast if your guild's dropping a bunch of Feast. That is really the big consumes I would recommend. Other than that, you need stuff like these protection potions and these frozen runes. They come in really handy. And then you'll be able to use your mildly irradiated potions on some of these fights. But that pretty much wraps up my conclusion of this raid. So far during this phase, I feel Fire Destro Lock is insanely strong. I think it's slept on right now. I think through that video I just kind of showed you, there was some mistakes made, some potential for some higher min-max, and I think within the next coming weeks we're really going to see Fire Destro take off. Some of the best Destro Locks in the world will get their gear, their trinkets, their 6-piece, and really see what limits this spec can push during this phase. Thank you so much for sticking around this long in the video. I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.